Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and welcome back to our 2D platformer tutorial here in Unity 5. Woo! So if you didn't see my short little video I made, it should go up the same day as this video. Just looking at the slight few changes that have taken place between the older version of Unity and the brand new Unity 5 version. If if you're in the middle of upgrading to that, there's a few changes you might want to be aware of. The game gets slightly broken, but perfectly fine, easy to fix. So just check out that video if you haven't already. And we're going to continue on with today's episode. And today we're going to look at adding knockback to our player when he gets hit. Because at the moment, when he walks into an enemy, it kind of looks a bit bland. If we go over here when the enemy starts moving, we walk into him, we just kind of push back and forward with him. I don't know. If we try walk into him, we can push him, but that's no good. We want to get knocked back when we get hit. Something like that. And we also want different ways to deal with the enemy. For example, we're going to do if you jump on the enemy and will hurt him that way, or if you have a little weapon you can stab him with. So we're going to need a couple more enemies wandering around though. It's kind of boring just having one enemy guy. So we're going to take our enemy, we're going to change from enemy 1 to just enemy. Go to our prefabs folder here, we're going to drag the enemy in to make a little prefab out of him. So now we can just drag a couple more into the level, pop them in there, and we hit play, and those guys will wander around just like our original enemy does. We see them. See, there he goes. Woo! Oh, don't hurt me. The only problem is if they walk along. Oh no! We're stuck. We walked into each other. So we want them to turn around when they face each other. Or alternatively, actually, you know what probably makes even more sense? We don't want them to turn around when they face into each other. We want enemies not to collide with themselves. So what we actually need to do first is give them a special layer. So we'll just go to our we go to our prefab of enemy, and we go to layers here. We don't have an enemy category set up. So if we go to add layer, all we have to do is just add in enemy there, then go back here, and we'll just select enemy. We'll change whatever are inside him. We should be just like just the 2 points for detecting the thing. Now that'll have changed all these guys back here. You can see layer enemy 1, enemy 2. These guys are all enemy. And then in our project settings, we go to physics 2D, and we'll scroll down to enemy, and we'll see enemy down the bottom here lines up with enemy at the top. So we'll untick that. So what that means is any two objects in the enemy layer, if they collide with each other, they'll just ignore any collision and they'll just walk through each other. So we'll see that here now. When we hit play, we go back in. Once that guy bounces off the wall and he goes and meets his friend, they just go walk by each other, which is perfect. Because we don't need our enemies colliding into each other. They're gentlemen enemies. They know how to walk around each other. So that's perfect. So what we're going to start off with is dealing with this kind of knockback that we want to give to the player. And basically we need this to happen on the player himself. We could try and do it at the point where our hurt player on contact. It will involve this script, but we could make it go from there and say add a force to the player. But the way we're handling movement is we're taking the movement directly from any keys that are pressed and making that set to the speed. So what we actually want to do is kind of override that slightly. So what we're going to do is create a couple of little components up here. Or components, variables is actually the word I'm looking for. So we'll start off with public float. We'll just say knockback, and a public float knockback count. So the knockback will hold the amount of force that we're going to apply to the player when he gets knocked back, and our knockback count will be that'll be our countdown thing. And we'll actually put another one above our knockback count. We'll do public float knockback length, we'll call it. So the knockback length will be how long the player will be knocked back for in terms of time, and the knockback count we'll set it to that amount of time and then minus it until it goes to 0, for example. And we also want we'll want to know whether the player should be knocked back to the left or knocked back to the right, depending on where the enemy is that's knocking against us. So we'll just create a public bool and knock from, oh, we'll do a capital F, knock from right. Just to see if, so we'll say like if the enemy's on the right, then we want to be knocked to the left, and if the enemy's on the left, we want to be knocked to the right, which is relatively simple. So down here we have our movement code, which is handling, this is the bit that's handling whether our player is moving left to right. And we want to kind of say, we don't want, when our player is knocked back, we don't want whoever's controlling them to be able to move them still. Because once you're knocked back in the air, you should be knocked back for a second and then the player can move. So what we're going to do is, we'll say if knockback count is less than or equal to 0, then you can do this bit here. So what that'll be is, say we have a knockback count and the player gets hit, we'll set the knockback count to say, I don't know, half a second or whatever, and then time will tick down, and then once it hits 0 again, then you'll be able to move the player again. And by default, it'll be 0 anyway. So you'll always be able to move the player until you get knocked. So then we'll say, so then if that's not true, we'll say else. I want to just put a couple of curly brackets here. So the next thing we want to check is, okay, so if it's not knocked back, then we know that the enemy is after knocking into us. But we need to know which side is the enemy knocking into us from. So we'll say if knock from right, which is our Boolean thing to determine if the enemy is on the right or the left. So if knock from right is true, that means that our enemy is on our right. So then if our enemy is on our right, then we want to knock our player to the left. So we'll go my rigid body 2D dot velocity is equal to new vector 2, and we have our knockback, our amount of knockback, which is just knockback, but we don't want to add a positive knockback. We want to say minus, because we want to move our player to the left if the enemy is on the right. So we go minus knockback, and we also want the same amount of force to knock him up into the air as well. So there you go, that's perfect. So if knockback, if the enemy is on the right, then we'll do our velocity, will go to the left. So then obviously if not knock from right, then we'll just have the exact same line of code, and we'll just paste it in there, but instead of minus knockback, we'll just have knockback, because then if the enemy's on the left, then we'll knock him to the right, which is perfect. And then the final thing we want to do here is, we know that our knockback count is greater than 0, so we want to make sure that the knockback count is always going downwards. So we'll say knockback count minus equals time dot delta time. Cool. So now obviously if we save this, we don't have anything that's setting any knockback, but we can test it out just by hitting play here. Oh, actually, you know what will be useful if we actually had some values put into the player. So we'll unpause or unplay unplay. Some people would call that stop, but whatever. So we'll set our knockback. We'll set this to say 10, and the length of our knockback we'll set to, we'll just set it to 0.2 of a second. I don't know if that'll be enough, or we'll see. So if we hit play, once it finishes, there we go. So obviously nothing's happening just yet. And what we're going to do is, when the player gets hit, we're going to use the hurt player on contact script, and we're going to add something that'll will make the knockback count equal to knockback length. So here we're just going to say 0.2. Oh, you see that knocked them up in the air just like that, and it looked like it knocked them up a good amount as well. So we'll say 0.2 again. Oh, we have to set this one to 0.2. Sorry. Yeah, that's a nice little knock amount. So we'll just change knock from right here to test this. So again, we'll say 0.2. Oh, he gets knocked back to the left. That's perfect. That seems like a good amount of knock to me. I've said knock too many times here now. So now we'll go to our hurt player on contact script, and we will open that up, unless I already have it open. Oh, I do, of course. So here we're going to, again, this is going to be nice and simple and keep it nice and easy. We already know within this little bit here that that the enemy is contacting the player. So what we're going to do is create a variable of player here, and to determine what the player is, because this is what we're going to be able to access the script that has the knockback in it. So we'll just say player is equal to other.get component, and then we'll find the player controller script. So that'll make player equal to the player will be equal to the player controller script that is attached to the player that we have going. So then it's very simple. Once that's found, then you can just go player dot knockback count is equal to player dot knockback length, and then we want to determine whether we should knock the player to the left or the right. So we have our knockback or knock from right variable, which is exactly what we want to do. And very simply, we just need to decide whether the player, or in this case the other, is on the left of the enemy or on the right. So it's very simple to do that also. We'll just go if other.transform.x. So that means the x position of the other that the enemy is colliding with. If other.transformer.x is less than transform, no, not capital T, small t, transform, if I could spell, yes, transform, here we go, transform dot position dot x, and I don't know why I just said transform dot x here, because it should be transform dot position dot x. There we go. So basically, if the other thing is less, if the other object's x is less than the enemy object's x, then that means that the other is on the left. So if that's true, then player dot knock from right is equal to true. Perfect. And if not, then we'll just say else, because if that's not the case, then otherwise we have to set player dot knock from right is equal to false. So now that should be everything that we need to handle our knockback on our player. So if we go back into Unity and we hit play, and once everything compiles again, and we walk over here, walk into our enemy, oh no, he knocked us back. We just let him walk into us, bam, bam, bam. Oh no, look, we're losing all our health, and then we're dead. But our knockback is working perfectly. And of course, you can fiddle around with however much knockback is going on there, however much you kind of think is appropriate. And the reason for putting the knockback within the